Today we're so excited to give you guys our honest review of the Singapore Airlines first class suites from JFK to Singapore. This first class flight is supposed to be one of the best in the game. The total flight, including a short layover in Germany, is nearly 22 hours. This is on the Airbus A380 with a price tag of over $15,000 one way per person. So with that, we have super high expectations. Let's go. Somehow, we were lucky enough to snag this flight using miles. It came to around 243,000 miles per person for the one-way flight to Singapore. A lot of times the award availability for Singapore Airlines, you have to wait for first class and even business class. So when I saw this come up for 243,000 miles, I had to jump on it. After arriving at JFK, getting all checked in and passing through security, we went to the Virgin Atlantic Clubhouse. Since there's not a ton of flights from New York to Singapore, Singapore Airlines uses the Virgin Atlantic Clubhouse, which is actually pretty nice. You can order small bites and drinks directly through the app and they bring it to your table. Singapore Airlines is supposed to offer an amazing culinary experience. With that being said, we didn't want to stuff our faces at the lounge or have too many drinks because they serve Krug on the flight, and Krug is comparable to Dom Perignon. Then it was time to make our way to the flight. First class is configured in a 1-1 configuration with a total of 6 suites. Since we didn't have a lot of time in advance and we booked an award flight, we weren't able to get 2 rooms right next to each other, so we got one across the aisle. I say room because it's literally your own room, your own suite in the sky. When you first walk into your suite, you'll notice that your chair is separate from the bed, which is really cool because there's a lot of space in here, especially for a commercial flight. Singapore Airlines is actually pulling its Airbus A380 and the plane's first class suites from New York on May 15th, 2023. So I'm really happy that we were able to grab 2 of the last seats. The cabin is nearly 50 square feet and features a bed, an armchair, but unfortunately it will no longer be available in any US market. Luckily, the A380 is still going to be flown on routes in Europe, Asia, and Australia, so people can still access the suites in those markets. You have a nice sized TV to the right, and you have a door that closes completely. The door itself was a little sticky and kind of hard to move, but eventually they were able to get it kind of back on track, and it does provide a lot of privacy, which is nice. The decor was pretty simple. It wasn't anything over the top like you'd see on Emirates, but it was comfortable and it was commercial. I wasn't wowed at all, but I was really impressed with the amount of space that they give you up here in the suites. The interior design of the suites is pretty basic. You have your creams, your tans, your dark brown leathers, and there is a little vanity area where you can get ready during the flight. You also have 2 windows per suite that you can control with the pad that's in front of you. It is really nice to have the 2 windows, especially when you're taking off and landing. And honestly, I don't mind having my own separate space from Brad, just because we're going to be on this flight for, like I said, 22 hours. They only offer you juice before you take off, unlike a lot of the other airlines where they give you champagne. However, they did give us this bottle of water as well. I really don't want to be a spoiled brat, but I think the water selection could have been a little bit better. Maybe Evian, Fiji, Voss, I don't know. The hand-tucked carpets were a little dirty, but it is what it is. And before the flight took off, while the rest of the passengers were boarding, I decided I would take a look at the bathroom and change into the provided pajamas and slippers. There's 2 bathrooms in the first class section. One is much bigger than the other. It has the vanity and the seating area. The other one is more of just a toilet and a sink. But overall, they have basically the same design, a very contemporary, clean look. The larger of the 2 bathrooms was pretty spacious. You have a vanity area, a separate toilet, a sink, and a place to kind of just get refreshed while you're in flight. And inside the vanity kit, you have things like toothbrushes, sanitary kits, wipes, and there's also even a facial mist spray if you want to freshen up even more during the flight. Again, the bathroom wasn't anything over the top. There wasn't a shower or anything like that. It kind of reminded me of kind of a luxury RV. So far, the overall aesthetic of the plane is pretty bare bones. I'm not really sure if they were going with a more minimalist design, but it wasn't very elaborate by any means. And after everyone got loaded on, it's time to make our way to Frankfurt. Luckily, since we're going to be on this flight for quite a while, they did have a large selection of in-flight entertainment. There's a lot of interactive features, and you can control the touchscreen TV with the remote in your chair or the pad next to your bed. There's nothing worse than being stuck on a flight, especially a long flight, without a large selection of in-flight entertainment, especially if you're a frequent traveler. So it was nice that they had a lot of different movies in different languages and TV shows. And in the suites, they also offer complimentary Wi-Fi, which is nice because you can stay connected while you're on obviously a very, very long flight. The menu is kind of broken up into where you're flying to, and there is a large selection of different things that you can eat and drink throughout the flight. We started off with Krug champagne and some toasted nuts. And then of course, it's time for the caviar. Your chair is able to rotate, so when you're dining, you can turn to the right and have a full table, or if you want to just kind of relax, you can adjust your seat accordingly. Unfortunately, they were out of a few menu items like the Macallan Lumina single malt whiskey. Me and Brad are big whiskey drinkers, so it was definitely a bummer, especially when you're in first class, because this is the kind of whiskey that we wouldn't buy back home, basically mainly because of the price tag. I don't want to be that person, but I'm gonna be that person. On the first leg of the flight, there were only 5 people in the first class suites, so it was a little odd that they were running out of things. Maybe the plane wasn't, stocked or equipped from takeoff. Or maybe since they're no longer offering this flight in the US, they just decided, hey, what does it matter? Honestly, the caviar was very good, but the spread itself was a little lackluster. And comparing again this flight to Emirates, when you're having caviar on Emirates in first class, it really is an experience. This one was just kind of caviar. The layout was very basic, but hopefully the rest of the culinary experience on this flight will be better. Hopefully, I guess you'll have to find out. The Amenity kit and the glassware were Lalique. However, the Amenity kit had the most random stuff in it, like a bar of soap, even though there's not a shower, and a room spray, which I guess they were kind of saying, hey, you're in a suite, it's kind of like a room, but it was just not what I would expect for an airline Amenity kit. They did, however, give you the basics like lip balm and body lotion. The slippers and pajamas were pretty comfortable, and there's also a small closet in your suite that you can store your belongings like your jacket or small bags. They do also give you really nice headphones. They're Bang & Olufsen, they're noise cancelling, and it's nice when you're in the air because it helps with obviously that kind of commotion in the background. And after the caviar and a few glasses of champagne, it was time for our main entree. I had the smoked filet of beef with chimichurri sauce. It had like a potato pancake with carrots and asparagus. Honestly, I was expecting a lot more and was kind of disappointed so far with the food on this flight. The steak wasn't bad, but it really wasn't good. The potato pancake was just kind of mushy. It was just not really what I was expecting for this flight. And for Brad's main course, he had the Cantonese style fried prawns in special sauce with Chinese greens and egg fried rice. The prawn, aka shrimp, was in a kind of a coagulated sauce, and you can just kind of see what it was. It reminded me of the food that you would find in the food court at your local mall. And Brad said it tasted about as good. Maybe this is just a one-off, but based on the food that we've had so far, this is definitely not a very enjoyable high-end culinary experience. And for dessert, we both had a chocolate cream and mousse cake served with coffee ice cream and chocolate caramel sauce with a nib crust. The dessert itself was very good, except for the fact that the ice cream was literally a solid block of ice. I don't want to complain, but again, if you're paying $15,000 per person for this one-way flight to Singapore, I would expect a little bit more attention to detail, especially when it comes to the food. Although the food wasn't the best, they definitely made up for it when it came to the drinks. We had our fair share of Krug champagne and Caperdonish Scotch whiskey. So I'm not a mathematician, but I did do the math. All we need to do is each of us drink 75 bottles to cover the cost of the flight, and we may get close. Even though our rooms weren't connected together, there was still plenty of space to kind of go over and visit when you wanted to. And then when you were ready to go, you could just head back over to your suite and shut the door. And after we drank probably half of the alcohol on the plane, it was time to get ready for bed. You were able to freshen up in the bathroom, and while you were doing that, the flight attendant was able to put down your separate bed, which is not connected to the seat. It's its own separate bed. The bed itself was probably one of the coolest features of the suite, and the TV was even able to swivel so that you could watch it directly while you were laying there. The bed itself was very spacious, even for Brad, who's like 6.5 feet tall. And after getting some much needed sleep, we made our descent into Frankfurt, Germany. What's actually kind of cool is that we're going to get back onto the same plane, into the same suite. Our layover was only about an hour long before we made our way to Singapore, so we were met by a Singapore airline employee and taken to the Lufthansa Senator Lounge to take a quick shower and grab a little bite to eat. The shower itself was really refreshing and clean, and in the lounge we decided, hey, we're in Germany, so let's have a Bex. And then it was time to get back on the plane and head for our second leg to Singapore. And like I mentioned earlier, we were sitting in the same suite that we had on the previous flight. It is luckily a different a la carte menu, so we have a good chance of getting a couple decent meals. When we got back on the plane, they didn't provide another amenity kit for either of us, but they did kind of straighten up the suite, which was nice. I guess they kind of assumed we would be fine with the original one. However, they did give us fresh pajamas and slippers. I put the slippers on actually, but then I had to change back into my shoes for takeoff because that's the rules. The alcohol stayed the same, which is fine with me. This is literally a full day of traveling, and I don't think Brad got much rest at all, so here he is sleeping in his seat, even though he has a bed in front of him. And after takeoff, it's time to pull out the table and start with our first appetizer. And for an appetizer, we had the Singapore chicken satay, which was with onions, cucumber, and a spicy peanut sauce. It was pretty good actually. I was hopeful after this first dish. I mean, it wasn't anything special or incredible, but it was, I would say, a step above traditional airline food. And of course, we had the caviar again. It is what it is. Don't judge me or do judge me. It doesn't matter. If there's caviar on a flight, I'm having it. The caviar itself, again, was very good. The bread was like kind of cold, but the garlic bread was the bomb. I also had the country chicken soup with ginger, and then for the main course, the open lasagna of lobster and monkfish with yuzu curry sauce, vanilla carrots, and braised black roots. And it tasted like exactly what it looked like. Peas, noodles, some sauce, pasta, and fish. The dessert, however, was delicious. Brad and I both had the tart Sirtan Classico served with vanilla ice cream, and it was definitely one of the best courses we've had on this flight so far. And this leg of the flight is like 13 hours long, so we just kind of hung out, laughed, relaxed, swiveled in the chair. It is nice to have that bed right in front of you because when you want to just kind of jump in it and relax, you have that option. Or you can sit in the chair, read a book. The service and the flight attendants on both flights so far have been pretty good. I wouldn't say they're as refined as Air France or Emirates, but they were good. They did seem to be a little bit confused about certain things, and it was kind of a bummer that they were out of some of the menu items, but it is what it is. One of my favorite things about this flight is the fact that you can close the door and you have your own private room that feels really comfortable. Mid-flight, it was time for a light snack, so I had the mushroom soup with a muffin. The muffin was a muffin, and the soup was actually really good. I'm not trying to nag on all the food. I understand this is an airline and there are certain stipulations that they have when it comes to preparing the food. However, I have been on other flights where the food has been far more superior, so there's not really like a huge excuse. After lounging around for a few hours, it's time to have breakfast before landing in Singapore. You start off with juice and a fruit plate. For a starter, I had the yogurt bowl with fresh berries and almond slices. After that was finished, I had the seafood congee, which was a rice porridge with prawns, scallops, and fish, which was really good actually. Congee is not for everybody, but whenever I travel to Asia, I always like to have it at least one time for breakfast. For breakfast, Brad chose the scrambled eggs, which were with ripened tomatoes, potatoes, sauteed mushrooms, and pork sausage. There was a really beautiful sunrise as we started our descent to Singapore. Alright guys, it's time for our honest review of Singapore suites from JFK to Singapore. The in-flight service was very good. They weren't as refined and as confident as I would say Emirates or Air France, so with that, we're going to give it an 8. The suite itself was really cool. With a $15,000 price tag, I don't know if I would recommend it if you wanted a kind of a culinary experience as opposed to just a lot of extra space and a lot of legroom. The amenity kit was a little basic, and if it were up to me, I would probably revamp the entire product offering. Maybe things like a pillow mist and facial products, since you're going to be on the flight for a long time, and usually when you're on these kind of flights, by the time you land, you look pretty haggard. I don't know what you're really going to do with a bar of soap, since like I said earlier, there isn't a shower and there's not really any kind of way for you to freshen up with the bar of soap. The room spray is nice. I'm glad that I have it. I'm taking it back home and I will use it. But again, not really necessary for this particular flight. And for dining experience and food, we're giving it a 6. The breakfast and desserts were pretty good. However, the entrees were subpar at best, which is really unfortunate because we were expecting the food to be like top quality, top notch. So with that, we're giving it a 6. If you can find this flight at a fair price with miles, I would highly recommend it. But if you're shelling out $15,000 for the one-way ticket, I'm going to take a pass. And if you want to compare the difference between Singapore's first class suites to Emirates A380 first class, you can watch our honest review here. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. Where do you guys think we should go to next?